debating part 2. This is debate on clauses 12 to 117, schedules 2A to 8, and the substance of the bill.
Mr Chairman.
Dr Megan Woods.
Thank you, Mr Chairman, and this is one of several contributions that I wish to make on part 2. There is, of course, the very meaty part of part 2 that deals with regeneration plans, how we make them, who exercise powers, the limits on power and appeal rights. But specifically in this part, Mr Speaker, I want to speak to clauses 102 to 107, which is, I think, where the real business end of some of this legislation gets down to, and this is to the transfer of assets, liabilities and Crown agreements. Because there is much said about Regenerate Christchurch, the joint venture between the Crown and Christchurch City that will be responsible for the regeneration of many parts of our city. And that is vitally important, and I will return in a later contribution to discuss those regeneration plans. But what we also have to remember very carefully is what this legislation does set up with is a new organisation which in previous iterations of the legislation was known in the somewhat superhero monkia of Crown Co, but now has a name of Otakaro Limited. And this is the agency that is empowered not only with getting the anchor projects up and running, but also with the residential red zone and the land that lies within the residential red zone. And I have some very specific questions for the Minister and the Chair around what lies between 102 through 107. Because these set up the tertiary instrument that transfer and delegate and give delegated powers to a Crown entity under this section of the legislation. But, Mr Chairman, when one goes and has a look at the detail of this organisation, which is Otakaro Limited, there are some questions that we would like answers to. If we have a look specifically at the constitution of Otakaro Limited, there are some questions there, one of which is specifically, Minister, the definition of major transition as it sits within the constitution of Otakaro Limited. This is defined as 25 million or half the value of the entity. And Mr Speaker, 25 million, when you're dealing with, Mr Chairman rather, when you're dealing with the size of the transactions that Otakaro Limited are going to have to undertake, whether they be anchor projects or they be the residential red zone, these are figures that do need some explanation around why it is that is the definition that is given. Because, Mr Chairman, if you compare this to similar Crown entities that hold similar functions and similar powers, this is a different definition than is being used. So other entities would use the Companies Act definition of major transaction, whereas Otakaro Limited under the Constitution that comes into effect under these clauses of the legislation institutes a dollar amount. And I just would like to hear from the Minister why it is that a different road has been taken with Otakaro Limited than it has with other Crown entities such as Tamaki Redevelopment Company Limited, Crown Asset Management Limited, Southern Response Earthquake Services, and of course the CRIs operate also under the Companies Act definition is there. So that is something that we do have some questions around too. The other thing in regard to Otakaro that we do have some questions around, and something we're interested in the answers around, is the section of the Constitution that deals with distributions, because this really is where a lot of the business end of the legislation is. That at the moment, the distributions, if you read this in concert with the objects of the Constitution, allow Otakaro essentially to work as a clearinghouse bank for the Crown. So, Mr Speaker, I'd like the Minister to take a call and state whether it is desirable or possible to insert into the objects of the company, the regeneration of Christchurch and the putting back of any profits into the regeneration of Christchurch, because as Otakaro's constitution currently reads, that any money that is generated through Otakaro Limited doesn't have to be put back specifically for the regeneration of Christchurch or for the benefit of Christchurch. Now, Mr. Chairman, we think this is something that does need to be addressed. We think that Otakaro can be a very positive vehicle, Mr. Chairman.
Dr. Megan Woods.
That Otakaro can be a very positive vehicle for the moving forward of not only the anchor projects, but actually getting some great things done in the residential red zone. But Mr. Chairman, we'd just like some more detail on how it is that this company is going to operate. It will of course be subject to Public Finance Act stipulations that it is accountable to Parliament and to its select committees, so that there is a clear audit path that will be there for the company that is established and has assets transferred to it under sections 102 to 107 of this legislation. But there are some questions that we do have around how it is going to operate, what it means for Canterbury, and how it is that we can, to use a phrase that my colleague, the Honourable Annette King, likes to use a lot, whether or not why this would not be a hypothecated account in terms of Christchurch, why this money would go back into the consolidated fund, why this wouldn't be money that is there. Any profits that are generated are there for the benefit and regeneration of Canterbury, and that is something that we would like to see. Because, Mr. Chairman, as the Constitution currently reads and is enacted under this legislation, that there could be a huge profit made through the regeneration of Christchurch, and then that money could go and be spent on housing in Auckland. Now, housing in Auckland, I'm not that one-eyed. I know that it is a vitally crucial thing that this country needs, as are roads in the regions of New Zealand, but I would like to know why it is that this company hasn't been set up and the transfer of assets that happen under this legislation hasn't been set up so that those benefits do flow directly back to Christchurch and sit squarely with Cantabrians. So I'm looking forward to a contribution from the Minister to answer those queries on that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman.